Chat, Episode 5, An American Werewolf in London.
Did you hear that? What was it? A coyote. There aren't any coyotes in England.
What happened to them?
Well, the police report said they were attacked by an escaped lunatic. Must have been a very powerful man.
Jack and I were not attacked by a man. It's an animal. A wolf.
Did he say a wolf?
Yes, I believe he did.
Did you get a good look at the man who attacked you?
Doctor, my memory is fine. It's my sanity I'm beginning to worry about.
You've never had bad dreams before?
Well, sure, as a kid, but never so real, never so weird.
I'm going to look into your eyes.
My friend Jack was just here.
Your dead friend, Jack.
Hi, David. He told me that I will become a monster in 2 days.
The supernatural, the power of darkness, it's all true. Please believe me.
Believe what? That tomorrow night, beneath the full moon, I'll sprout hair and fangs and eat people?
You'd be surprised what horrors a man is capable of.
Are you all right now?
I don't know. I'll let you know the next full moon. I'm a werewolf.
You're gonna change. You'll kill people. You'll become...
I know. A monster.
David, don't lose control!
Control? What control?
David, I can help you.
No, I'm not safe to be with. You gotta stay away from me. Run!
Everybody dies in it. It's very bloody.
Beware the Moon. Everybody, welcome to Episode 5 of Real Chat, a new podcast totally committed to and focused on film as a form of entertainment. 1981 was clearly the year of the werewolf, with the mythical creature being featured in not one, but 3 major motion pictures. Today we're looking at the most popular of the bunch, a film that has accumulated a cult following and is regarded as a genre classic, whether that genre be horror or comedy. 1981's An American Werewolf in London. My name's Adam Stolfo, and I'm joined here today by good mate Brose Avard. Brose, how you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. What a great choice of film. This is going to be exciting to talk about. I had a lot of fun. It's one of the joys of doing this podcast, is getting to watch a film you either haven't seen for a while or have never seen and get to experience it. So, God, American Werewolf in London, great film.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I'm also joined over here by good mate Mr. Andrew McCaskill. How you doing, my friend?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah, totally in agreement. Just I've seen this film sporadically over the years and watched it again the other night and thoroughly enjoyed it. Still an absolute cult classic and hilarious at the same time. You can't ask for more.
Absolutely right, mate. And the most excited member of Real Chat as well, Mr. Matt O'Neill. Matt, welcome back.
Hello.
Now, this is his...
Hang on.
I was just trying to sound excited.
Were you describing Matt as being excited, or were you telling him he should be excited? I'm not sure if that was an instruction.
Try to build it up, because this is his episode.
Hello.
His choice. And
absolutely.
But you've been excited all week, haven't you, mate?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Watched it every day for the last week.
It's a daily
still
ritual.
Not sick of it, but no, big fan of the film for the same reasons that we did the Commando and I guess all the other films. I guess Seven's a bit of a worry, but yeah, nostalgia reasons. Big fan
Seven's easier to explain when you've seen Andrew's House.
I just like dead people.
But yeah, and I have dragged Andrew along to see a few screenings of it in the last
It's been our date movie, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. 35mm at the Acme, and then again when John Landis was here recently. So
fantastic.
It's special to us.
Good stuff. This is the 5th episode of our Vintage Vault retrospective series, a conscious effort to tie in selected shows with something of relevance to the present. And like I said in the last episode as well, we've kind of strayed from this a little bit. I couldn't really work out anything any reason to actually tie.
I guess the closest is, John Landis was part of the retrospective of the Melbourne Festival last year. John Landis,
he's alive and breathing.
Still alive and breathing.
This current.
He directed a Michael Jackson film clip, and he's dead. Is that it? I don't know.
Special effects.
We're clutching at straws, but that's okay. That's quite all right. So,
that's for sure.
I just want to make a quick mention, just before we get into American Werewolf in London, I just want to make a quick mention to our listeners out there that even though we're talking about older movies, I think you're going to get the most out of our podcast if you've watched the movie that we're talking about recently.
See, I was actually going to... That's interesting you say that. I was going to say, out of all the episodes we've done so far, this is the movie you should go and check out. Like the other ones, I think, can exist if you've seen them before, but American Werewolf in London is a film that's worth a rewatch. This is an interesting type of film. I said to Adam during the week, it's not the kind of film that's made anymore. This is not a... And that gets thrown around all the time when films come out. They'll be like, oh, no one makes films like this anymore. But the script is impeccable. It's a nice, tight script, except for some gaps that we're going to talk about later on. But it's a solid script. It's a slow-paced film. It's a nice balance of horror and comedy, but it's not rushing to do anything. It's not trying to be anything other than this nice little film. And you're just not going to see these films anymore.
I think that's part of the
charm.
Yeah, the charm. I mean, he wrote this when he was 19. And
yeah.
I believe there's like very little changes were made from that original script. And, you know, it's a fantastic film for a 19-year-old to write, but like you said, it just adds to that charm, and it's just a nice little... I
wish I could write a shopping list as good as this film. So, and I'm 35.
It does play like that, doesn't it? Like, you can just imagine him like just in his bedroom, just like, well, this would be a cool movie to watch.
Yeah.
Just pouring it out, and then that's it. It's done and dusted. Let's go and make it. And
he does tell a
so
great
entertaining
story about being on location in Europe,
Yugoslavia,
yeah. And he tells the on the DVD, and I'm sure he tells it everywhere he goes as well when he talks about this film. But he talks about the incident that happened in Yugoslavia that inspired the film when he was 19, just crewing on... Whose film was he crewing on? Someone else.
Kelly's Heroes.
Yeah, Kelly's Heroes. There you go. And that's the other great thing about Landis films as well. He's got so many great anecdotes and stories about everything he's done, and that kind of adds an extra enthusiasm to it. But great rocking along little film.
Matt, do you know the story, the Kelly's Heroes and the like? And
so I think he was a stuntman at the time. I mean, Landis is someone who's worked his way up in film, like from the mailroom all the way up to being a director. You know, he was a stuntman. I think he was a stuntman on this one, and he was like on a break with a friend from the area, and they stumbled across some gypsies burying a body covered in garlic, and
they appeared to be performing rituals on a man being buried so that he would not rise from the grave.
Yeah, it was feet up.
Yeah.
So that kind of triggered, as with any great horror story, I think, like when you think of Bram Stoker with Dracula, it was just from a nightmare, you know, and it just like that spark, and he took that and came up with American Werewolf in London.
It made Landis realise that he would never be able to confront the undead, and gave him the idea for a film in which a man would go through the same thing. So,
it's an interesting starting point for a horror film, isn't it? Is that Landis basically was thinking of a situation... He says this on the DVD, and it's quite funny. But the idea that him and his mate were like, well, what would happen if a zombie approached you, or if an undead person approached you? He was like, oh, I'd be stuffed. He's like, oh, that's where the film's going to start. The idea that... And that's the starting point in this film. It's also worth bringing up early as well how important it is to this film that it was shot in London. You have this amazing English-American sensibility that's combined here. It's not an American film, it's not an English film, but you get this really nice combination of those two sensibilities, which works really well. I mean, shooting in London, it's a very intimate space in London. It's very tight, it's very small, narrow roads and so forth. And you just get that energy about this film. And again, it's only on rewatching it for the podcast that I realised, but casting all these amazing English actors that are just chewing up the scenery and just doing these amazing performances that lend credibility to the story. And then you've got the American lead, which obviously creates an accessibility because we're all used to having American male leads in films. And then, of course, there's these amazing New York Jewish kind of jokes or even LA Jewish jokes tied all the way through it, with different Yiddish phrases being used constantly, which obviously goes back to Landis. But yeah, it's just an incredible cultural combination, this film, and it really helps it kind of bubble along.
10 years before they made it, he'd already spoke to Rick Baker about the idea of the transformation scene. Like, he had that scene already planned out in his head, and that was...
We're going to get into Rick Baker in a little bit more detail as well, because it's iconic, his role in this film. So,
and also his connection with The Howling.
Yes.
on that as well. It's quite interesting.
In the early 70s, Landis wrote, directed and starred in his debut film called Schlock. Have you seen this, or have you heard of this movie?
I haven't seen Schlock, but I think it's very much, from what I've heard, it's very much aimed at like kids. It's a kids movie.
Yeah.
I think Roger Corman was originally going to be on board to produce it, but he was pushing Landis to have ample amount of breasts featured in the film, and like, very much wanted to make a...
Sorry, just quickly... Did Landis work with Corman as well in his formative years? Is he another of the Corman
not like
school?
Joe Dante was. And,
right, okay.
Yeah, I mean...
And Coppola.
I'm sure they would have...
They would have crossed paths.
Heavily involved, I'm sure they crossed paths.
He might have worked for him, but not as intimately as a... Yeah. Corman's, incredible.
One of the main talking points of this movie seems to be, and also when it was first released as well, critics and audiences alike had a hard time knowing what to make of it. Horror comedy was in its infant stages.
Landis mentions how hard it was for him to make this film. Because it was either too funny to be a horror, or it was too scary to be a comedy, and the way it was received, as you're saying, is exactly how the script was received when he shopped around Hollywood.
I think the common consensus was that it was too comedic to be an outright fright fest, and too scary to work as a traditional laugh-out-loud comedy.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth noting on this film, too, because it's one of the things that struck me. It is a horror comedy. Horror comedies are few and far between when they're effective. Vampire in Brooklyn, for example. But it's not an outrageously hilarious film, and it's not the most scary... horrifying film you're going to see. It's this incredible balance that Landis achieves. And it's a bit like a Shaggy Dog story. It's just that it's the telling of the story to get us to the end. It's enjoying the journey which makes this film so good, and it's the slow build-up of events. My favourite scene in the whole film is in the porno theatre when all the victims of the werewolf come back to basically assist him in how to kill himself because that's the only thing he should do, or it's the only thing he can do to right the wrongs. And it is one of the funniest scenes you're going to see in a film of any kind. But one of the reasons it's so funny is because it takes so long, and the journey it takes to get to that scene, it's just this huge payoff and this huge reward that you get. If you stop watching the film 60 minutes in, you probably wouldn't think it was either that scary or that funny. But if you watch the whole film, the payoff is so good, and the humour just builds and builds. And that's what makes this film, for me, this is why it's such an amazing film. It's the trajectory, it's the journey you go on, it's the slowly layering of character and situation that then, the first time Jack appears, the third time, Jack appears to David, that's the funniest moment. That's one of the funniest moments for me too, because it just... You've seen him twice already, and we get the joke. But then he pops up, and it's just so ridiculous and hilarious, and David's freaking out, and Jack's just this laconic kind of very Jewish kind of guy who's just kind of like cracking wise and as he decays in the mirror. But Landis has really built an amazing... a film here.
Yeah, I think it comes down to expectation. I think if you go into the film thinking you're going to be scared witless, I think you're going to be disappointed.
Yes,
I still think there's some great scares.
Oh, there is.
I mean, I don't know if it's because it's one of those films I saw as a youngster, and some of the scenes scared me. But I mean, and maybe Thriller has something to do with that as well, because they kind of took some of those scares and
definitely.
I must admit, when I was a kid, after seeing this film the first time, I used to reenact the subway scene at Parliament Station in Melbourne. So
the subway scene is one of my favourite scenes in the movie.
The appearance of the werewolf in that sequence at the back is so chilling. It's so scary.
You mean the way that there's like a big, massive wide shot at the top of the frame, and it sort of like creeps in? That's brilliant.
And in one of the featurettes, when Landis is talking about that scene, they show that little bit of the scene again in the featurette, and it's still just this chilling moment where big open wide shot, nothing, this tiny little werewolf.
A typical posh British guy as well, who they got for that scene as well. He's brilliant in that role.
So good.
It's great.
Yeah, it's magical.
But as I mentioned earlier on as well, the film was one of 3 high-profile wolf-themed horror films released in 1981. Have you seen the other ones, Matt? The Howling and Wolfen?
Yeah, I've seen them all. Wolfen's all right. It's not great. It's a lot more about like the American Indian kind of folklore behind werewolves and that. The Howling and American Werewolf very much have an affair similar to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love both of them. The Howling's very much more a horror film, but Joe Dante and John Landis are very, very similar filmmakers in that they're both huge film buffs, and both always, for me, tend to make their films with a wink in the eye to the audience.
American Werewolf in London is a Universal Pictures release. How's this? It was released on the 21st of August 1981 in the US, the 8th of April 1982 in Australia. That's the biggest gap that we've had so far. I know we've had some big gaps in the 80s so far. That's a lot of time.
Well, did they walk the prince over or something?
Yeah. You touched a little bit before, Brose, about the iconic nature of this film's setting as well. Obviously, the film was shot primarily in London, but also in Surrey and Wales in the UK as well.
Yeah, the earlier scenes are short. The north of England scenes are shot in Wales as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about Landis is he's gone to London, he's shot the film in London, he's using everyone's English there. Parts of his crew obviously are American and the stars are American, but he's using these amazing English actors. Rick Mail pops up in the background at The Slaughtered Lamb, which is brilliant.
It's a great cameo.
It's one of those awesome moments where I'm like, oh, that young guy at the back looks like Rick Mail. And then it got to me so much I jumped on IMDb, and sure enough, there's Rick Mail. The other cameo I love in this is Frank Oz playing the American embassy representative, and then later on Miss Piggy and Frog pop up in the dream sequence.
Yeah, there's some great cameos in this film.
Family's house. Yeah, thematically, it's really nice. It's just a really nice combination. But I love Frank Oz popping up in anything. He pops up in Blues Brothers for Landis as well, obviously, and he pops up in this. And he just looks and sounds like Bert everywhere he goes. And, that always excites me.
Mr. Kressler.
Okay. This film has a budget of an estimated $10 million, and it grossed $60 million worldwide as well. So it did very well. It did pretty well.
I can't understand why they didn't go along and make number 2 after that.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd get right on board, because Landis was quite smart in that, having those 2 lead actors who weren't really that well known. Yeah. I mean, up to that point, they'd barely done a thing. He had them tied up to do a sequel already, and got them quite cheap, as he had for the first one.
Yeah, right.
So it was all like the contracts were all there. They were all ready to go. It just, for some reason, just never happened. Which
Interesting, isn't it?
A shame, yeah.
Yeah, and what we ended up getting, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we did end up getting, we weren't...
sorry, I don't
disappointing.
mean to sidetrack us just quickly. What did Landis follow up American Werewolf in London with?
Blues Brothers, this, and then Trading Places. Yeah.
Okay. That is very interesting that they didn't go into the sequel, but I mean, the films that Landis did next were so big, I guess.
You could argue Thriller.
Definitely.
Everyone was back to do it again.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Landis, considering he's the writer and director of this film. Landis rose to international recognition as director of the wildly successful Animal House in the late 70s, with blockbusters such as The Blues Brothers, Trading Places, Spies Like Us, which is a film that you really like, isn't it, McCaskill?
Just back on Animal House for a second. From memory, that was produced by Ivan Reitman, and he wanted to direct it, but the studio wouldn't let him, and they got Landis in to direct Animal House.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because Reitman had already been tied up with the National Lampoons. Yeah.
And it continues. Three Amigos coming to America.
This is amazing. I recently watched John Landis' documentary on Don Rickles, which is an amazing documentary, and it came out a couple of years ago. And Don Rickles is an amazing comedian. And watching that film, the casual jump on IMDb, what's Landis done? And when you look at that list, I mean, every film impacted me in my childhood when it came out. Three Amigos is just one of the most under-resourced DVD releases of all time, but one of the funniest films, and he's just a powerhouse comedy director.
And you like Spies Like Us as well, don't you, Andrew?
There's like three Amigos and Spies Like Us. They've got like some of it's a generational. Those are generational films. You meet someone of a similar age to you, and you can drop those lines like you're using your dick as a pencil, or you're thinking with your dick, and people will know what you're talking about and get the gag. It's just they're classics of the '80s, and have Landis to thank for it.
Did you hear about the low point of his career as well, when there was a tragic accident in regards to the Twilight Zone movie? Have you guys heard about that story as well?
Morrow?
Yeah.
Vic Morrow was decapitated by the helicopter on set of the Twilight Zone.
Two child actors were killed.
Yeah.
Do you know what exactly happened? Or
there was a malfunction with the effect or the stunt or whatever happened there, and the thing that affected Landis most was it was ongoing in court for quite a long time afterwards, and it took a huge personal toll on him. And he already felt awful. Vic Morrow was an amazing actor, and obviously no one wants anyone to die on their set, and then the two children as well. But I think he mentioned this maybe briefly when I saw him in Melbourne last year. So obviously in the court case, he was being sued as well as the studio, and so it did take a big emotional and personal toll on him, which, slowed down his career at that point.
Absolutely it did. Yeah, I mean, he never really was able to reach those heights post that, was he? It was obviously quite a down point in his career. We touched upon this a little bit about his collaboration with Michael Jackson. Obviously Thriller is the big one. It was created originally to play as a theatrical short right?
Yeah, it was released in cinemas. I remember
was,
the time,
yeah. But
Sorry, that's a different song.
But it forever changed MTV and the concept of music videos garnering multiple accolades. So, but he also did another song, a big one of Michael Jackson's songs, which was in 1991. He did Black or White, which premiered simultaneously in 27 countries with an estimated audience of 500 million people.
This is a concept that people, or at least Gen Ys, may not understand, but do you remember when film clips used to be debuted in prime time on television? Like, a good film clip was just revolutionary. Molly Meldrum used to hosted the debut of Thriller on Australian television.
Yep.
He hosted debuts of other film clips. But going back to our previous episode, without Landis and Thriller, we may not have got a David Fincher. So, because David Fincher's career is off the back of what Landis started, really. So it's quite incredible. And Thriller's an amazing clip. Definitely track it down.
Andrew, let's talk a little bit about, do you know the cinematographer, Robert Paitner, I think is how you pronounce his name. What do you think of his work in this film?
That's a good question because I have no idea what his involvement has been in the past. It's not a big name in the cinematographer's world.
Well, what do you think of the way this film looks?
Oh, it's fantastic. I think it doesn't draw attention again. It's just got a real subtle atmosphere to it and a real mood to it. But I'm not familiar with what he's done since then. I think
Muppets in Manhattan.
Well, there you go.
Thriller. He worked with Frank Oz and Landis a fair bit, but yeah, you're right. I can't think anything past this film as being. I can't think of anything better than this film, which might be unfair on Muppets in Manhattan, but it's kind of where it's Thriller. I mean, Thriller is huge, and you definitely. Like, for me as a horror fan, Thriller's what started it. But like the start of the film, just the Moors, and I love the big puffy jackets that those guys have on. I think in the
I know at the start of the film there, you're looking at them wondering if it's like it's like Michael J. Fox's jacket in Back to the Future, the big puffy
jacket.
It's nice. It's like the precursor. Yeah, it's before it, so it's the precursor
that's
to
it.
But that's one
the
thing
life preserver look.
That's always stuck with me is that the American backpackers. I've never heard of an American backpacker. I think if they had been the Australian werewolf in London, it would have been a lot more the job in the pub. And
there are plenty of Australians in London that transform on a full moon. Don't worry about it. But that's part of the charm of this film, isn't it? That's it's really a fish out of water kind of story as well. And these two clueless Americans in their bright puffy jackets walking into the slaughtered lamb, like it's just the juxtaposition is amazing, and it helps this film along. It really pushes it. It's one of those things I talked about a bit with Ghostbusters, I guess. But it's that synchronicity, or it's that nice coincidence, and Landis has obviously planned quite a lot of this. But just when those little extra elements come together and pull something a bit tighter, and it just makes a film that little bit more enjoyable and also just more convincing, I guess, especially for this concept, because we really need to believe those two guys. We really need to believe that pub. And it's a ridiculous scene to have early in a film because it's such an outrageous pub.
Well, I just they're walking straight into it.
It's like starting Star Wars with the Cantina bar. Like it's so jarring and ridiculous, but at the same time, you're on board with it.
But it's clever from it because they arrive on a truck full of sheep. Yeah, it's the slaughtered lamb that they go to. Like these guys are in trouble from the start. But even just the pentangle.
What kind of a name for a pub is that anyway? I love that one. Slaughtered lamb.
What's the name of the actual pub where they filmed that as well?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I heard it recently.
The Village Green, wasn't it? No, sorry.
But the pentangle on the wall and all the talk about Lon Chaney's Wolfman. Like really, I mean, this is like what almost 15 years, is it, before Scream comes out, or Web Craig?
Oh, yeah.
And all films are doing this kind of postmodern, take on self-referential, within the horror films.
Guys, let's talk a little bit about the cast in this film. David Norton plays David Kessler, and apparently he was cast because John Landis had seen him in a commercial for Dr. Pepper. Did you guys know about this at all? You
yes.
did? Yep. Yeah. Other people considered for the role, which I found particularly interesting based on some of our previous episodes. Apparently some executives hoped that Landis would cast Dan Aykroyd in the role of David.
That makes sense.
And John Belushi as Jack. Yeah.
It'd be a whole different film if that was to happen.
Completely different.
But you can see that happening. When you look at Landis' career post this film, that all makes sense.
So what do you guys think of David Norton's performance?
I think that because he's not that well known, it really works very well.
I think the key to this film is both the Jack and David, or the David Norton, and they're unknowns, and that helps. I mean, one of the great things about this film is the start. The dialogue between these two is so good, and that's what draws you into their characters. Like, it's a very talky first 5-10 minutes of this film.
Yeah. So the other guy, Griffin Dunn, who plays Jack Goodman.
And you can see they've got chemistry and it works really well. Like, yeah. And that's, I'll mention later on, but in the commentary, you can tell these guys are just really good mates and they've got really amazing chemistry. So, yeah.
Landis advised Griffin Dunn that the key to the character of Jack Goodman was that he was always to be encouraging, optimistic and cheerful as a member of the undead, no matter what his stage of ghastly corporal decay.
I love it. There's a great moment in the porno theatre where they're all the other victims are attacking him, and then Jack just turns around and goes, "Hey, he's my friend."
That's right. That's a great moment.
So funny.
I love that moment.
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
Good. Yeah.
And guys, just calm yourself down just quickly as well. Jenny Agutter plays Nurse Alex Price. Nice. How do you sum her up, Matt? I'm going to go to you first for this one.
Look, no, I think she's gorgeous. Has everyone seen Walkabout?
I've not seen Walkabout.
No, haven't seen Walkabout.
No, I haven't seen it.
I have indeed, and I know where you're going with this. Yeah,
I mean, she was only 16. Oh, she was only 16. That's from Get Carter. She was only 16 in that, but yeah, she you see everything. I don't know how best to put it. But
Matt would like to retract his description of Jenny and replace it instead with a sound effect. That sound effect is boing.
I think
right from the age of 16 too, apparently.
Yeah.
Also,
isn't that weird, creepy thing that happens where, like, how old were you when you saw Walkabout and she was 16?
Well, I would have been
37, wasn't it?
You would have been what, 14 or 16?
No, you're completely right. Yeah,
right.
14.
It's like, when I watch episodes of The Wonder Years now, I feel creepy that I had a crush on Winnie Cooper, but it's okay because I was her age at the time.
Exactly.
So it's okay.
No, that's right. It was what I'm saying.
No, but she's beautiful in this movie.
Yeah, if you go from Walkabout to this film when she's in a nurse's outfit, God's sake.
Yeah. No? We all need to just sort of calm down a little bit, but
yes.
Yeah. But it's the accent as well, though, Matt. There's an appeal there. Like, what can you say?
That explains Adam's attraction to you, Matt. So
yeah.
It's about the accent.
Exactly right.
Certainly, I wanted to break my leg and be in that hospital while I was watching that film.
Although it's interesting because Jenny's not typical of all the nurses in that hospital, because the other nurse we see is who gets jealous of Jenny at some point.
That's right.
A little nod to that.
That's exactly right.
Definitely not of the caliber.
Yeah. The one that points out that David is Jewish.
Yeah.
Because she's had a peek. Which is exceptional, because David's actually, David Norton's Roman Catholic.
Oh, right.
So that just shows you the lengths he went to.
No, they explain that because it is the practice at the time. So.
Well, and also that's why you don't actually see his knob during the dream sequence. That's true.
You see a lot of penis in this, though.
No, you don't see his at all because
a little bit.
A little bit.
Whose penis do you see?
In the zoo.
Yeah.
You see some penis.
No, you don't see it. You don't see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Subliminal penis.
A lot of bush.
That's a line you don't hear very often.
It's the 80s. There is a lot of bush.
There is a lot of bush.
And I can tell...
There's a bit of dangle. There's definitely a bit of dangle.
I have paused it and tried to find it. But with the VHS, it didn't used to work.
No, it gets all fuzzy.
Are you sure you're not talking about the actual wolves and their penises in the zoo sequence? Because I don't know where you were supposed to be looking, but...
So we go from Jenny Agutter to John Woodvine, who plays Dr. J.S. Hirsch as well. How do you think he does in the film?
I think he's great. I think in that authoritative doctor, like straight guy role.
Yeah. He underplays it too, which is nice. He's not over the top. This could be a real mad scientist role if he wanted to. It could be a real passionate, why aren't you listening to me kind of thing. But he's really he underplays it. He's nice and sensible, and it's really charming and quite a lovely performance.
And Landis has him back in Burke and Hare.
Well, we can't talk about American Werewolf in London without mentioning the amazing makeup effects, which this film is iconic for. It was the first film to earn the Academy Award for Best Makeup. So that category was actually created in 1981. So it's almost like this film started that, and they've been recognised like they should be ever since.
Yeah, and now when you think, though, horror films don't tend to win that often, even though they still to this day they have some great effects and that. But I still, like I said earlier, I think The Howling probably is the better of the two.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, considering that it's certainly not as well known as this movie. It's nowhere near, actually.
Yeah, no, that's true. Which is true. I mean, it is within the horror realms, I guess. But I definitely recommend a watch for it. I mean, it's a very good film.
It is interesting, and it's something that it's a theme that I come back to a lot in cinema in general or art. It's those restrictions. I think when an artist has restrictions, that you can produce some of the best art. So I think Lucas's restrictions on the first Star Wars film is one of the reasons that film works so well. And in this film as well, Landis obviously didn't have a massive effects budget. Like Howling obviously had a bigger budget, I would assume. But the way he shoots around his limitations, the hand puppet they use for the close-up shots of the wolf, for example, in this is pretty ordinary. And there's a great little moment in the on the DVD where they show a behind-the-scenes or a deleted scene where you can see the inanimate puppet, and then you hear Landis call action or whatever, and then the puppeteer brings that puppet to life, and there's no moving eyes or eyebrows, the ears don't move. Like, it's not like one of these amazing Henson animatronics. It's a very simple glove puppet. Once the puppeteer brings it to life, it becomes a wolf, but it has to be shot tight, it has to be seen quickly, you can't spend too much time on it. So it's those limitations, and it's a bit like Spielberg with Jaws. You know, the fact that the shark effects or the puppet shark didn't work is why we don't see the shark as much as Spielberg wanted, which makes that film so much better. And so Landis has done really well with his limitations and has really created quite a scary creature for something that is very basic and very simple puppetry and effects. So, the amount of blood, the speed with which we see the animal is working in his favour, and he's nailed it. But I think it is partly that limitation that makes it so effective.
Can we talk a little bit about what I refer to as the extreme sequence in the movie in Piccadilly Circus at the end?
Which kind of comes out of nowhere in some respects.
It really does.
But at the same time, thank God it comes along. And it comes back to that idea I think that he is building. That's the build of the horror part of the plot, is that it ends up in this massive stunt sequence in the middle of Piccadilly Circus, and everything's kind of trickling along. It's immediately after that very funny porno theatre scene, and then bang, we're in Action Town.
And it's right there as well. They shot it there
shot it
as well. I'm surprised they were able to do this the way that they were. It's incredible.
It's amazing. A bit confusing. He gets a little bit Max Sennett. He gets a little bit Keystone Copy in this sequence to a degree.
And it's violent as well.
Very violent.
Very violent.
Very violent. Like people dying and getting their heads squashed by cars, and a cop gets jammed between two cars. Like it's just,
he does too.
It's like he's just written all these amazing, and that's when you can tell Landis was a stuntman, because he's just writing all these stunt gags and just building them up.
And he
one on top
puts himself in that scene, right?
He does, yeah. He pushes the old woman through the plate glass window.
And then falls through himself.
Hit
by a car, right?
I love it. Landis kills an old woman in this film.
And you were talking about the scene in the porno theatre before. Yeah. That film was actually shot before they started principal photography on this one.
Yeah,
it's called See You Next Wednesday. That's the name of the movie.
Which is obviously a play on the old phrase, see you next Tuesday. It is also, I don't know if anyone paid attention to what is shown in the porno theatre in that sequence. It is a weird plot for a porno. There's that weird aggressive guy that comes in and starts yelling and then realises that he doesn't know either of the people having sex and storms out again. It's
bizarre.
It's played perfectly, but it's just the weirdest.
I told you never to do this again, and the guy says, "You've never told me such thing."
And he goes, "Oh."
Yeah. There are moments in this film where it's kind of almost that flying high kind of in jokes, where it's just the kind of surreal gag, and that's one of them where it's just like a joke within a joke in the background that you're not really supposed to pay attention to, but there's always that tongue in cheek that he has that kind of lightens the mood at the darkest points in the film.
Which is, he's just come from ringing his family in the US, speaking to his sister, a real heartfelt moment, and then straight into the porn theatre.
Yeah.
The comedy just goes up a notch.
It's a real subtle talent to do that.
It's very well done.
Interesting to note too, on one of the re-releases of this film on, I think it was might have been the HD DVD release, they removed the phone box conversation with his family.
No way.
Because they decided that it dated the film.
How terrible.
But it's since been put back in later. In the Blu-ray release, it's been put back.
It's a very well shot scene.
We'll touch a little bit about that when we talk about the home releases.
But the Piccadilly Circus sequence is remarkable for just the amount that happens in such a short amount of time. Landis, as farcical as this film gets, Landis has created a nice, believable world for this werewolf to exist in. And part of his theme ongoing, which we talked about at the top of the podcast, was that this film for him is about the reaction to this situation, and a different reaction than you would see in a normal horror film. The reaction is what is as important as anything else. This Piccadilly Circus sequence it's the way that whole area in London reacts to there being this wild animal on the loose, which could easily just be a lion from a zoo, for instance. Like, it doesn't have to be a werewolf. They're not reacting to the fear that would be associated to a mythological creature coming to life. They're reacting to a big wild beast being set loose in Piccadilly Circus. So there is this, even though it's a bit slapsticky, there is this kind of sense of believability about it. There is this honesty about it, that it is just a pure reaction, which also makes it kind of a bit weird because it has nothing to do with the plot. But it is a fun little sequence.
I just want a few opinions from you guys about some of the things that I actually think work against this film. The film's faults are few but impossible to ignore, and mostly rooted in plot development and pacing. Much of the film has a meandering, unfocused quality, and the ending in particular is abrupt and unfulfilling. Werewolf lore junkies will also be disappointed, as there are really only passing mentions of the traditional mythology. So the whole bit about severing the werewolf's bloodline is quite thin and undeveloped, and there's no resolution at all for the undead Jack, which is my biggest issue with this movie, whose afterlife in limbo is the driving force for most of the narrative.
Doesn't he get to carry on to the afterworld once the bloodlines...
I don't know. Does he?
That's the implication.
Yeah.
All of them get to go on to heaven or hell once the werewolf's bloodlines.
There's no closure, that's what you're saying.
I'm trying to say... He's not there at the end, like he should be. Yeah. Particularly in the scene at the end with the alleyway, where the movie ends abruptly anyway. Yeah. I really feel that he needed to be part of the end, considering he was at the start. It looked like he was going to be a main character.
I think that ties quite well in with the whole being a lunatic aspect of being a werewolf. Like the whole idea that maybe he was just mad. Maybe he just had turned into a crazy killer, and so he's
so open to interpretation.
Yeah, schizophrenic. Then goes on this mad killing spree, and then he's dead. So you're not going to see him. So
do you actually, as the biggest fan here, do you disagree with some of those points that I just made mention of there? Do you think that
I never had an issue with the silver bullet stuff?
Okay.
I like the way they dismiss that just really quickly. Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all.
Because it's almost like saying that this is real.
Okay.
This is real. And I think a lot of people's reactions in the film would be close to that, especially in that Piccadilly Circus scene, just the stupid detective looking around, so almost laughing, bemused, but frightened as well. It's quite clever. But
was I the only one that wanted that second detective to be played by Michael Palin? Was that just me? Would that have been much funnier?
He was great, though.
It was good, but it's just one of those weird roles which is just a comedy role.
It's almost like completely just a comedy role. Faulty Towers for a moment there. It's just there's such an English kind of slapsticky kind of vibe about those two.
And I love how if you listen to him, he's always right.
Oh yeah, of course.
Even though he's bumbling, he's still the guy that's right. It's on the money, So
I don't know. I'm watching it going, I wish Palin was there, but anyway.
I always wish that.
I wish it often. How important to you are the carrying on of law and traditional rules in these types of films, and how every time there's a big blockbuster of film, and it's happening with zombies at the moment, the way zombies exist in film or television has been rewritten constantly. How fast should they walk or shouldn't they walk? How important is that to you when it comes to this type of film, and how important for you is just having a nice solid film and a good story?
That's always going to be more important, the latter. I mean,
I would think if it was a really loose film and a really bad film and then they broke all these rules, then maybe you got something to complain about. But if it's a nice solid story.
All these rules were created by Hollywood and the Universal monsters. It really isn't something that's come from medieval age. That's where a lot of these rules started.
It's very true. Very true.
So it's just Hollywood doing what it's always done.
If you're enjoying the film, you're enjoying the film. You're just going along with it.
Jenny Agutter.
Yeah.
Adam?
Silver bullets? Who cares?
Jenny Agutter is in it.
There's some silver bullets right there for you.
Yeah, I can't. I have no comeback to that either. Mate. Nothing at all.
5 stars.
Just a couple little bits of trivia, guys. Just quickly, at the close of the credits is a message for the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. It was included because when David is trying to get arrested, he shouts, "Prince Charles is a faggot." The film was shot months before the preparations for the couple's July 1981 wedding as well. So I found that to be an interesting little bit of trivia.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to try and get arrested, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
that's a very funny scene. It's that's where the root of the 17-year-old script writing comes into play there. It's
completely.
So good.
Have we touched on the zoo sequence in much detail? We haven't yet, have we?
Do you want to bring it up?
Are you coming up to that, or we've spent time talking about the Piccadilly Circus? It's worth mentioning the zoo sequence where after the first rampage, David wakes up naked in a wolf enclosure at the London Zoo, and then there's this pure comic moment where he's trying to escape. It's just a gag scene. It's really nice, and it establishes some nice elements to the mythology, which is that he doesn't remember what happened the night before and things like that. But it's the little boy who's was it the naked American man just stole all my balloons?
Yes, sir. A naked American man stole my balloons. What?
Is one of the funniest lines in the whole thing. But it's a very funny scene, but a very bizarre scene. But
it's also it's the focus for I think it was the German one sheet for the poster.
Oh, really? That's funny.
One of the Japanese posters is him stood at the bus stop in the woman's jacket. Like, it's just, and you know, American Werewolf in London, but there's no sign of...
That is awesome.
Yeah,
a lot of those just chosen that.
Yeah.
Like, there's just like, where's the horror in that picture? But, you know, you just kind of...
I guess when you think for Germans, it's a pretty light fare.
Yeah, that's right.
You know.
Yeah. It's at least they're...
yeah. They weren't going to have the Nazi Death Squad.
That's just on Tuesday nights thing.
Wow, yeah.
Which is another... I mean, the dream sequences, which we haven't really touched on, are just some of the most horrifying scenes in horror films.
I think that they're the most brilliant parts for me. Like, they're the parts that stay with you when you... Every time you watch it, especially when you're like a 15-year-old kid, that they just traumatize you because they shock you to the core, and they're so well done. The way that they're cut together, the sound design, especially when there's the scene of him in his bed in the forest. It's such a beautiful dream sequence, and it just slowly kind of cuts in tighter and tighter, and then there's that shocking cut to his face.
This is one of two werewolf films to win the Academy Award for Best Makeup. Rick Baker won both times, the second being for the Wolfman remake in 2010.
That was a piece of shit. Have you guys seen that?
No.
Yeah, no.
I didn't hear anything good about it, so at all.
One star.
Whoa, okay. Yeah.
And that's Rick Baker.
John Landis had a bit of a communication issue on the set with the effects crew. He told them to take the head of Inspector Villiers and throw it across the hood of a car. They looked at him in puzzlement, and after he picked up the head and threw it himself, they replied, "Oh, you mean the bonnet?" So this is obviously a little bit of a
English thing.
That's right. John Landis initially wanted to keep the werewolf screen time to a minimum, having it only appear in a couple of scenes, just enough to give an impression of something huge and ferocious.
On the DVD, he still claims that you see too much of the wolf.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he says that maybe there is a bit too much of it, and there's not much of it. So
the long shot of I think we touched upon this, but the long shot of the werewolf cornering Gerald Bringsley on the undercover escalator was an example of this. Landis' decision to show the werewolf as much as it was shown was based on the fact that Landis loved Rick Baker's design of the monster, which touches upon what you said before.
Definitely,
as well.
and the transformation scene when David turns into the wolf for the first time, amazing. It's just it's an incredible sequence, and Rick Baker and Landis have collaborated on a really scary but entertaining transformation.
Particularly the pain that
the idea that your body's transforming and you're in an immense amount of pain.
Yeah, it's great.
Quite original.
The thing with the whole sequence, though, which is what they talked about 10 years before making this film, is Rick Baker took those ideas to The Howling and Joe Dante because he thought American Werewolf was never going to get made.
Happen.
And then obviously Landis rang him up and said it's happening, and he's like, well, actually, I've already signed on to do this, and they know the secrets. You know, they've got and he, apparently still to this day, he hasn't completely forgiven him for that.
Even though he did come across and start working.
Yeah, but I think it was just something that he was like...
I love one of the quotes from Landis about this film too, and it's just... It's just comes back to Landis's just infectious enthusiasm. He talks about how originally he wanted the transformation scene to be all done in one shot. And he goes, I didn't know how it was going to happen. I don't even know if it was possible, but I wanted it in one shot. In the end, it's not. It's a series of edits, which is, of course, how you would do it. But I just love that idea of Landis, where he's just like, that transformation scene's key to this film, and it's all going to be one shot. No CGI existing, no real green screen at this point, really, either. But obviously, they did a great job. It's still a very scary sequence.
Can you imagine using CGI? It just would not have the same impact. There's something about that, having that something that you can actually touch and seeing it kind of like a nose protruding, a snout coming out of a human's face. So powerful still.
Landis quote as well is he says, people are always surprised which part's the actor and which part's the puppet, and that people are never 100% when they're guessing which shot is which. So,
with that scene though, there's a certain part that kind of takes me out of it, but I guess it's a huge Landis touch, and it's when he looks straight at you, looks at the camera. Do you guys have any thoughts?
It was just the tight shot of the eyes, you mean, or the?
No, there's a bit like when he's laid on the floor and he's kind of got like the.
He looks directly at the camera.
Just at the camera, well, at the audience, I guess. Yeah, just staring at it for no reason. Like, kind of breaks a fourth wall for a moment, and third wall, wherever he breaks a wall.
The fourth wall.
The fourth wall. Yep. Yeah, he breaks the third wall as well.
I didn't notice this.
He breaks a few walls.
You've seen it a few times, and it really bothers you. Like,
I wouldn't say it really bothers me. I've heard people talk about it, saying it's kind of like it takes him out of the mood. But I guess also being a Landis fan, like he does that a lot. You know,
it's interesting. You often see, pretty underqualified extras do it in movies if you're looking around, like sometimes as well. But your main cast member, that's quite unique.
Yeah.
But it's intentional, though.
Next time you watch it.
Is it intentional?
We don't know.
It's very intentional, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. It's a close-up of him just looking at... Almost like he's looking at us for help.
But you're saying it makes you feel like it's breaking the fourth wall.
Well, yeah...
Well, you can intentionally break the fourth wall. Ferris Bueller breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you think of it, like, we've got a lot of shots just like, from above, watching him, bird's eye view, and but then all of a sudden he just looks straight at you, and he's not particularly frightening at that moment. You do kind of feel sorry for him, and especially with the music that's playing as well.
Yeah, we'll go a little bit deeper with the music very shortly, but I just wanted to talk a little bit quickly about the way that people can see this film today. So it originally came out on DVD in 1998, and then it was re-released a couple of years later in its 20th anniversary collector's edition.
Which is a ripper. It's a ripper release, that 20th.
2001 release.
It's great. Yeah. And there's only a couple of things added subsequently from the 20th anniversary. Like, it's a really solid release. Yeah.
But how's this? I know you actually brought this up before, Brose, but a high-definition version of the film was first released on HD DVD. This very, very short-lived format.
Do people remember HD DVD?
Yeah. It was a format war with Blu-ray.
This was released, and Fifth Element. I think that's all it was on.
No one knows about
Die
it.
Hard was on HD
I think Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula as well.
Yeah. And that came out in 2006. And then the Blu-ray disc titled American Werewolf in London, the Full Moon Edition, was released in 2009. So there's been a few releases over a bit of time here. And on the Blu-ray as well, Brose, there's a commentary for this film as well. Have you heard that?
Yeah. So the commentary on this one, it's the 2 stars. So it's David Norton and Griffin Dunn. Personally, I prefer a commentary that has the director involved because, he's the guy behind the whole picture. The problem with having actors on a commentary is occasionally they get lost in the film because they may not have seen it for a while and they just end up sitting there and watching it and laughing at what was happening on set, or laughing at the film, or, as Arnold Schwarzenegger does a lot, just telling everybody what he's doing on screen.
And which moments are funny.
In which, look for this bit because it's funny. But these guys, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, these guys are such good mates and they get along so well. Their energy is quite infectious. So even though it's not the most informative commentary you can listen to, if you enjoy this film and you like these guys, you're going to like them even more after listening to it. And it is a good, fun way, especially after you've seen the film half a dozen times, a good, fun way to watch it again. And they've got some great stories, different things that happened on set. So it's quite enjoyable. It's not my style of commentary in terms of I like something really informative, but it is just a really good, fun way to watch the film.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't really gravitate towards commentaries that just have stars. Like normally, I don't mind if the stars are with the director or someone more of note, but they don't really draw me in too much.
Yeah, not as much. But these guys are very charismatic, so it works. But it's worth a listen. It's worth a listen, but only if you're a massive fan, I would say. Yeah.
But here's a key thing: no DVD or Blu-ray version of the film actually includes the original mono track that it was shown theatrically.
Yeah, and I was looking at a few reviews during the week of the film, and that's one that is a sticking point. The audio on the subsequent home video releases, when they've put it into 5.1 or they've put it into stereo, whatever the mix they've done for the release, just not as good as the original mono. The audio is not as crisp and clear, and it's just there's a lot of complaints about that.
Now, it is a decent Blu-ray treatment that this film's got. I picked it up recently, as I told you, Matt, before. But don't go in expecting a Rick Baker-worthy transformation in visual quality. The film's age is definitely apparent in the transfer, with a look that's softer and more grainy than modern viewers have actually come to expect.
Was it, did they telecine it again, or was it digitized,
Not sure.
Or was there any work done? We don't know.
Don't know. But John Landis has reported that when he was approving a high-definition transfer of the film for DVD in the mid-2000s, he was taken aback by how gory the film actually was.
Wow.
So that's interesting.
He softened a bit in age, apparently.
Yeah. The best feature, though, Matt, on the Blu-ray is, which I watched recently as well, is this really amazing feature-length documentary on the making of the film called Beware the Moon.
Yeah, it's just like a fan has gone and funded it himself. And
I love the way he goes to the locations where the film was shot.
He's a real tall guy as well. He nearly bangs his head on when he walks into the pub. What kind
of weird nerd would you have to be to travel around the world to different film locations?
It's really well
Certainly
done.
No one on this table would ever relate to that.
No one would ever do that. Jeez.
It's not how people meet either, is it?
Yeah, it's not. No one would. You wouldn't meet anyone that way.
No way. Andrew, let's talk a little bit about the score and soundtrack for American Werewolf in London. Elmer Bernstein, our second Elmer Bernstein film.
There he is again. Good old Elmer.
Yeah.
I love Elmer Bernstein. Amazing.
Yeah.
My second favourite Elmer.
Yeah, after Fudd or
Fudd.
Yeah, right. I'm sure he's sad about that. Look, he's done another great job, but it must be said a very, very small amount of work was required.
7 minutes, apparently.
7 minutes is in the film, but the impact is undeniable. You can, when you're watching the film, it has a great presence in the little kind of moments that it comes in and out of the film. He's just a very creative and spot-on composer when it comes to mood and emotion. And another beautiful job with this film. Obviously, very hard to get any of this music to, as a release. There's not really much out there for you to kind of access. But the most interesting fact about it is the transformation scene, which he originally wanted to score. He scored for material for it, but Landis was absolutely sure that he would use the Blue Moon Sam Cooke track and had no need for any score. But Elmer Bernstein did it anyway, and there's a great story about a guy who witnessed an interaction between Landis and Bernstein in the recording studio on that day, where Elmer Bernstein raised his hands in front of the orchestra to get them get them ready for the preparation for the scene, and then Landis was in the recording studio and just said, "We don't need it, Elmer. We're putting Sam Cooke's song over that." And Elmer Bernstein said, "But you might not get the rights for it." And I don't know if he sounds like that. But Landis said, "Oh, I think we'll be fine anyway," and it just shut him down.
Wow.
But Elmer Bernstein just said, "Well, let's just play it anyway and see what you think." And apparently, it was incredible and a very, very powerful piece. And you can actually listen to it there's a CD that was released, which is called The Essential Elmer Bernstein Film Music Collection.
Cool.
Is that
so? It exists.
There's only,
holding of it exists.
Yeah.
That's a small. There's only a small number of tracks on that one. Is that the?
It's like a full kind of career release, like 2 CDs of all his themes.
I need to track that down.
And the one track, the American Werewolf one, it's hard to gather, but apparently it's called Metamorphosis, and the first 3 minutes is the score for that scene.
Oh wow!
Have you heard this?
Yeah, I was listening to it, and it's I gotta say it's very powerful. Like I didn't play it with the scene of the film, but when you imagine it, it has this sense of tragedy to it, which is completely lost in the final piece.
I'm surprised they haven't done
for the Blu-ray
deleted scene or something with their on. I just didn't think it existed.
It'd be a great feature if they put that on the Blu-ray.
Amazing, I didn't realise it was out there.
Because the Sam Cooke song works great. Like it kind of adds this kind of weird humour to the scene, but then Bernstein's it's just a really it's pure horror. The score.
Yeah. The film's ironically upbeat soundtrack consists of songs which refer to the moon. Bobby Vinton's slow and soothing version of Blue Moon plays during the opening credits. Van Morrison's Moon Dance as David and Alex make love for the first time. Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bad Moon Rising as David nears the moment of changing to the werewolf. A soft, bittersweet ballad version of Blue Moon by Sam Cooke during the agonising wolf transformation. And the Marcel's doo-wop version of Blue Moon over the end credits. Landis failed to get permission to use Cat Stevens' Moon Shadow and Bob Dylan's Moonshiner, both artists feeling the film to be inappropriate. On the DVD commentary, David Norton and Griffin Dunn said that they were unsure why Landis did not obtain the rights to Warren Zevon's
Werewolves of London. I was just thinking, I just always thought that song was in the film, and watching it back, I realised it wasn't. And that's, wow, where's Werewolves of London? Why isn't it there?
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's so bizarre.
And there is no actual official soundtrack release for this film of any kind, is that right?
No, not that I know of. I don't think there's...
Just this weird Miko one that I was telling you about.
Yeah, right.
Impressions of an American Werewolf in London album release. Do you know anything about this?
No, I'm pretty sure there is no soundtrack, official soundtrack.
Yeah,
I love those types of releases. I've got the really dodgy music from the films of Woody Allen release, which doesn't doesn't even have the full versions of some of the tracks. It was like $8 or something at Amoeba Records in LA. It's just the dodgiest release. You've got to track down a dodgy soundtrack release at some point.
I don't think there's any, if there's any deleted scenes, I wasn't able to find a huge amount on this movie. There's an alternate version. Universal Studios remixed the film's mono soundtrack, which we touched upon, to Dolby Digital and DTS for the 20th anniversary DVD, replacing the older sound effects and adding some new ones. How's this? Extra thunderclap sound effects were added in the scene when David and Jack are walking in the moors and it starts to rain. The first werewolf can now be heard growling in the rear channels as it circles David and Jack.
Yeah, when I watched the version, the DVD version I've got, I just assumed, but I didn't realise it was released in mono originally when I was watching it, of course, but some nice sound design in that would have been really tasty, because it's hard to get a sense of where the wolf is in that scene.
Yeah. A louder growl has been added to the rear left channel after Jack says it's circling us to make the audience jump. So that wasn't even in the movie originally at all. All the gunshots and car crash sound effects have been replaced, so upgraded, I guess. Yeah. The train in the London tube scene can now be heard moving from one channel to another.
That's all right. I like that stuff.
That's quite a standard
That's pretty standard
DVD
these days.
thing. Yeah. Despite the improvements, the music throughout is inexplicably mixed down a half pitch and sounds very different from the original mix.
Yeah, right.
And all earlier releases of the film, including initial 2-disc anniversary edition, are uncut. Universal Studios issued a statement saying that they will remove all affected stock and issue replacement discs. Wow. So all Blu-ray releases are complete and uncut as well. So that's a bit strange. At one point, David screams, "I'm a fucking werewolf, for God's sakes." For television, David Norton screamed, "I'm a famous werewolf, for God's sake."
which does work though, because he's I think it's in the papers at that point, so it's I'm
a famous werewolf.
Now, Matt, I'm looking at you for this little section just quickly. The film was followed by a 1997 sequel, An American Werewolf in Paris, which featured a completely different cast and none of the original crew, and is distributed by Disney's Hollywood Pictures. What's this all about? And why is this film not very well beloved? Or
it's pretty poor. Like I said, no one is involved from the original. Rick Baker cites it as being some of the worst effects he's ever seen in his life. It's terrible CGI and I guess kind of early CGI werewolf effects.
What year is that?
Was it 97?
You say 97? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So I know CGI is around, but it's
I was just trying to place it in terms of, because the CGI Star Wars re-releases came out, and the first one was in 97, and then there was definitely some good CGI. Well, I'm not citing that as an example.
Jurassic Park was CGI.
Jurassic Park, of course, that's 95, isn't it? Yeah.
93 even.
93 even. Okay, yeah. So there's plenty of CGI out there.
It's just at a time when it was kind of,
Is it just a retelling of this movie, but in Paris? Or
no, not at all. It delves into like an underground cult of werewolves in Paris.
Sounds shit.
It is. There's a funny sequence at the start where the guy, he jumps off the Eiffel Tower. They're doing they're like daredevils, I guess, traveling. These Americans are traveling around doing like base jumping, I guess you'd call it. And that's probably the most exciting part of the whole film. There's a cute French actress. I forgot her name. I feel awful because it just makes me look like a sexist pig.
And Pariard or something.
Something like that. But there's apparently a deleted scene which would have tied that film to the original one, where she mentions that her mother is...
Oh, it's Julie Delpy.
Yeah, that's the one. Her mother is Alex Price. And it's presupposing that when her and David got on, when David had he was a werewolf at that stage, I guess, she fell pregnant and this child turns into a werewolf.
That also means that the bloodline wasn't severed at the end of American Werewolf in London.
And it also means that for some reason, when when you're given birth to and turn into a werewolf, you move to Paris. So
obviously. Well, the hair's not as you're not judged as much for the extra hair there. Yeah.
Is there a scene at all with a baguette with teeth, at least? Wasted opportunity.
Yeah. But it's a poor film.
Have you heard about the radio adaptation?
I've not only heard about it, I've listened to it.
You've listened to it? Oh, good. Okay, and so this was just one sec, Matt. Sorry, this was broadcast on BBC Radio in '97. It was written and directed by Dirk Maggs, and with Jenny Agutter, Brian Glover, and John Woodline reprising the roles of Alex Price, the chess player, and Dr. Hirsch, respectively.
Yep.
The roles of David and Jack were played by different actors, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And it brought in some backstory that some people in East Proctor are settlers from Eastern Europe. and that the werewolf who bites David is revealed to be related to Hackett.
Yeah, it kind of opens up. Not too much. I mean, for me, one of the most interesting things was the first guy who dies, who we see at the start of American Werewolf in London, the film. He was an escaped lunatic, and his name's Lawrence Talbot, which is the name of Lon Chaney Jr.'s character in The Wolfman. Yep. So that was a nice nod. The transformation scene, though, was shit. Oh, yeah, on the radio. Just didn't work out. Yeah. My hand stretching.
I saw you stand.
But at least you had Jenny Agutter whispering in your ear when you listened to it. There's always a silver lining.
Yeah, that was it. And if they ever did a remake of this film, how would you feel?
Apparently that's in the works.
Yeah, apparently
it's been announced.
Yeah, in June 2009, so 5 years ago, it was announced that Dimension Films was working with producers Sean and Brian First on a remake of the film. This has since been delayed due to other commitments, so I don't know if there's been any more recent news.
With remakes, I never have an issue with them. I know everyone gets butthurt when they get announced.
I think it depends on the movie.
Even when whenever you end up seeing these remakes, everyone always says how far removed they are from the original ones, and we can get on with our lives. And yeah, I have no problem with it. I don't.
You'd be in the cinema watching it if it came out.
I will be, and it might even mean we get a new release of American Werewolf in London with the mono track, and even with that deleted the transformation scene with the Bernstein's music or something like that. You know what I mean? So it always opens up things like that.
Collectibles. Brose, what do you got for us?
I mean, this is a cult film, so the collectibles exist more in the prop replica and limited edition kind of bits and pieces. There is the bust of the wolf's face from the film, which looks scarier than the one that they use in the film. And then there's some more limited edition kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of the the sideshow figures of the Nazi, those Nazi warlords. I don't know what we call them, the mutant Nazi guys. There's a few of them. There's there's a collector in the US who I've seen some of his stuff, but a lot of that has been privately made, which is incredible, including a bust of Alex Price as a nurse. I'm not too sure what you'd do with that. I've got a few ideas. But it's not real. I mean, T-shirts, posters. Like I was saying, poster-wise, collecting them is quite a big deal because of the number of different types of posters that came out, like I was referring to with the German one, of the Japanese, and then that's kind of cool. But that's about it, really.
That's all right.
There is, I've just discovered in my enthusiasm, there is an action figure of David and the Wolf released by Sota Toys as well.
Oh, right,
which again is a very limited release, but it's quite cool. It's a very tasty looking set.
Let's talk about a few of the awards that this film's won. The main award that this film picked up was obviously the Academy Award for Best Makeup to Rick Baker. And he won that. So, and in its first year, as we made mention of as well. So, also the awards that count, Brose, the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy and Horror Films. It won Best Horror Film and Best Makeup as well. And it was nominated for Best Actress. And also nominated for Best Writing for John Landis as well.
Yeah, so nice.
That's pretty cool. The Rotten Tomatoes website certified this film as fresh with a score of 89%. Very high.
That's high.
41 positive and 5 negative. And the IMDb score is 7.6 out of 10, which is also very good for a film of this genre as well. So Empire Magazine named American Werewolf in London as the 107th greatest film of all time in September 2008.
Wow.
And on August 15th, 2013, the Universal Orlando Resort announced it will use the film as a basis for its 7th maze during that year's annual Halloween Horror Nights event.
Yeah, cool. All right. It looked amazing as well.
Cool.
On YouTube.
The maze was so popular, it became part of the 2014 Halloween Horror Nights event at Universal Studios Hollywood.
So popular it came back 6 years later.
That's it. Kim Newman of Empire Magazine praised the film. Halliwell's film guide described the film as a curious but oddly endearing mixture of horror film and spoof, of comedy and shock, and everything grist to its mill, including Tourist Britain and the wedding of Prince Charles. The special effects are notable and signalled new developments in this field. And Roger Ebert's review was less favourable. He stated that American Werewolf in London seems curiously unfinished, as if director John Landis spent all his energy on spectacular set pieces and then didn't want to bother with things like transitions, character development, or an ending.
I think that's tough.
Yeah. So let's just wrap this up, guys. Let's just go to our traditional 5-star review system. So I'm going to start over here with you.
We started that, yeah. We're the first people to ever do 5 stars. Yeah. I was going to suggest 3.14 4-star review system, Pi. But I think 5. 5 is more manageable. 5.
I'm going to start over here with you, Andrew. What are your final thoughts on this film, and what would you rate American Werewolf in London?
I would rate it exceptionally highly. I just think, for the reasons we've already discussed, the balance of humour and horror is just one of those. That's what I like about horror films. I like films that I can laugh and be horrified in the same moment, and this is one of the best examples of those kinds of films. It's horrific. There's a lot of gore in there, which is enjoyable, but there's always a joke just around the corner. So it's a film I'll return to many times, I think, in the future. So yeah, for that reason, I'd give it a 4 out of 5.
And you'd recommend it?
Absolutely, especially if you're 15 years old. As your first horror film, it's a must.
Fantastic. Brose.
Nice. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. In addition to what we've talked about, it's also one of those films that, and this is what I love about a comedy, if you can walk away and then bits pop into your head when you're not expecting it, you know, a funny line or a little moment or a set piece. The first time I saw this film, I watched it with my 2 brothers. It was on late at night, like 11 o'clock showing or something on television. And we quoted and joked around about it for weeks, months, years later. It's still an experience we still talk about every now and then, is the first time we watched it and just how much we enjoyed it, because we had no idea what this film was or what it was going to be about. And I love that about it. A good comedy should just sit with you, and it should just become part of your consciousness in a way. And this film definitely does that. And like I said at the top of the podcast, this is the kind of film that it's just struggle town to ever get something like this made ever again. And I think it's a nice, neat little package of a film. It's just a really well-made film, and is so much fun. So much fun. So 3.5. Solid
3.5 stars, and you recommend it to somebody?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, this film for me it's very much one that pulls at the nostalgic heartstrings. It was a film, interestingly enough, or maybe not interesting at all, but the first time I saw it was on TV in the UK on Channel 4, and it was a bit of a, you know, in the day and age now that we are with Blu-rays and DVDs with extras, this TV, it was like a series of films that were showing one a week, and you could write in and they would send you out an information pack about that particular film.
Cool.
I'm not sure if it was Mark Kermode who was involved in it, but yeah, it was kind of, so I sent away for it, was really excited about it. And yeah, ever since then, it's just been a film that stayed with me. But look, I 4 stars. Can you do 4.9? No. I was trying, no, but it would be 4-star film for me. I think it's just a real easy film, real simple, lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much going to echo you there as well, Matt. This is a 4-star film. I am just really excited that I've rediscovered it recently as well, mainly due to what we're doing here today. But this film is a lot of fun, and it's a product of its time. And like Bro said before as well, these films don't get made anymore, and it just makes me like it more that way. I really like it when a director like Landis can combine 2 completely different genres like comedy and horror and merge them together so well. I really admire that, and this film's just a lot of fun. And I also echo you, Andrew, when you say that, like, you know, it's a 15-year-old boys, like, you know, it could be the best film ever made for those young boys. So, but even for us as well, like, you know, it's iconic. The performances are great, the direction's great, and it's funny and it's scary, and that's rare. So I think it's quite unique like that. So I highly recommend this film.
Like I said at the top too, footnote, if you've never seen it before, just stick it out. Watch the whole film.
Yeah.
And I think in our culture these days, we're too ready for the quick joke or the quick set piece or the quick moment to happen and just be served up to us in the first 10 minutes. It doesn't happen in this film. Stay with it, and it'll pay off. It's a great film.
Yep. So, yeah, I think that's recommends all around the board. So just wanted to thank you guys for coming out today and discussing the film.
I'd like to thank Matt for choosing American Werewolf in
Absolutely.
London. It's such a great film, and it's so much fun to travel down this path with this film again. It's good.
You didn't thank me for choosing 7 last week. Do you want to just say that now?
Yeah, I haven't slept since.
Oh.
That's not true. I had a quick nap in my head in a bowl of cereal.
Bob Mack. That's right. But no, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for coming out today. And next episode we're going to be looking at our mate Stu's film of choice, which is Signs. So we'll look at that next time. So thanks very much, guys. And we'll speak to you soon.
No worries. See you guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.